Rome began to interfere in the politics of the polis of Greece at the end of the 3rd century before Christ. Its representatives acted as intermediaries in relations between the unions of the polis and Macedonia. The Greeks of the Achaean and Aetolian unions were at different times military allies of the Romans. By the middle of the 2nd century before Christ, Macedonia, Epirus, and Aetolia were under Roman rule. The last major force in the Balkans, independent of the Roman Republic, remained the Achaean Union. Initially, this union united the polis of Achaea, an area in the north of the Peloponnese. Later, it included the polities of Arcadia, which was inhabited by the Achaean Greeks, as well as the polities of the Greek Dorians of Argos, Sicyon, and Corinth. The Achaean alliance repeatedly tried to annex Sparta, and so, in the course of another conflict, the Spartans turned to Rome for help. The embassy was led by the Roman politician Lucius Claudius Orestes. He announced to the leaders of the Achaean alliance that, in the opinion of the Senate, Sparta should not be part of their alliance. Following this, Orestes declared that Argos, Corinth, Heraclea of Trachina, and Orchomenus should leave the union. The inhabitants of these cities are not related to the Achaeans, and they themselves were late in the Achaean alliance. The Achaeans responded by arresting all the Spartans who were in Corinth. Only a few of them managed to escape to the house of Orestes, who warned the Achaeans against such actions. Soon a new embassy of Romans arrived in Greece. The Achaean Union held annual elections for a strategist. The new head of the union was Critolaus, who favored war with Rome. The ambassadors wanted to attend a regular meeting of the Achaean Union. Critolaus sent messengers to the cities inviting them to the meeting, but privately instructed the representatives of the cities not to come. When no one showed up for the council, Critolaus suggested that the Romans wait until the next meeting in 6 months. The Roman ambassadors realized that they had been deceived and left for their homeland. Critolaus then gathered representatives of the cities and persuaded them to give Rome a fight. The idea was also supported by the Boeotian Union, headed by the Boeotarch Pythias. The Romans meanwhile appointed the commander in the war with the Achaeans elected consul Lucius Mummius. The propraetor of Macedonia Quintus Caecilius Metellus sent an embassy to the Achaeans. He persuaded them to end the war and allow the cities to withdraw from the Achaean alliance. Metellus began hostilities before the consul Mummius arrived. Sources differ as to whether the propraetor acted arbitrarily or by order of the Senate. The Achaeans, led by Critolaus, were at this time besieging Heraclea of Trachina in southern Thessaly. Critolaus showed himself a weak commander. He retreated from under Heraclea to Locris. Sources emphasize that the strategist of Achaeans did not dare to block the Roman road in the Thermopylae Gorge. Metellus caught up with the Achaean troops in Locris near Scarthea. In the ensuing battle, many Achaeans were killed and 1,000 were captured. Critolaus was missing in action. Pausanias writes that he was not found among the living or the captives. He suggested that the unsuccessful commander may have thrown himself into the sea. To the aid of the Achaeans moved 1,000 troops from Arcadia. He was late for the battle, and the warriors decided to turn back. But near Carinea in Boeotia, the Arcadians were overtaken by Metellus' troops and defeated. According to the laws of the Achaean Union, in case of the death of a strategist, the previous holder of this position became the temporary strategist until new elections. The strategos was Dii, and he was the head of the alliance after the death of Critolaus. Then the assembly of Achaeans confirmed his authority. Dius was actively preparing for defense. In particular, he gave freedom to some slaves in exchange for joining the army. Dius mustered 14,000 hoplites and 600 horsemen. Meanwhile, Metellus had completed the subjugation of the rest of Greece. He occupied Thebes, forbidding the pursuit of the scattered inhabitants of the city. The propraetor demanded the extradition of Pythias, which was soon complied with. Boeotarchus was executed. Then the legions moved towards Megara. The Achaean garrison retreated, and the city went to the Romans without a fight. from there Metellus for the last time offered the Achaean alliance to conclude peace, but Dius refused. Polybius in his work describes in detail the negotiations in the Achaean camp. There were many supporters of peace among the Greeks, but Dius and his adherents were in favor of continuing the war. Some of his opponents were even arrested and executed. Soon the consul Lucius Mummius arrived at the Isthmus of Corinth with his army. He sent Metellus and his legions back to Macedonia. The consul managed to gather a considerable force. In addition to the legions, there were auxiliary troops of Italian allies, Cretan archers, and detachments of the kingdom of Pergamon. During the night attack, Achaeans managed to inflict Roman losses and capture 500 shields. This battle encouraged them, and then they themselves went out to fight the Romans. In the afternoon battle said the training and numerical advantage of the Romans. Achaean cavalry fled at once. Infantry fought hard, until in the flank it did not hit a select Roman detachment. After the defeat, Dii fled to the city of Megalopolis. There the strategist killed his wife and then took poison to avoid capture. Many Achaeans fled to Corinth and then left the city at night. Many civilians fled as well. Corinth was totally unprepared for defense. Lucius Mummius waited 3 days, fearing an ambush in the city. Then the consul's troops took Corinth by storm. Probably, some part of the soldiers remained and gave on the walls of the last battle. The fate of the great city was terrible. Corinth was burned. The men who were taken prisoners were slaughtered. Women, children, as well as the slaves freed by Dius, were sold into slavery by order of the consul. The Corinthian temples contained numerous works of art. Most of them Mummius ordered to be sent to Rome. A smaller portion was taken by the Pergamonians. Pausanias wrote 3.5 centuries later that some items from the Corinthian booty were still stored in Pergamum. Many of the works, as Roman authors wrote, perished in the fire. And Polybius mentions that Roman soldiers did not spare works of art. Legionnaires played dice on paintings thrown on the ground. After the destruction of Corinth, Interpolisni unions were dissolved. The cities at war with Rome torn down fortifications. In the polis established oligarchic governments. A few years later, the Romans allowed the restoration of interpolis unions. But by this time, the territory of Greece was already under the authority of the Roman governor.